Salutations, I'm sorry, Let's say 7, and today we've got a completely new kind of video for you guys. So I'm not just going to be covering one build, I'm not just going to be covering Borderlands 3, we've got 4 builds that we're covering. So we have a Brick, a Mordecai, a Zero, and a Amara that we're going to be covering. Now, all of them follow a specific theme. If you couldn't tell from the quick glimpse of all of the items that we're going to be using and skills that we're going to be using, we have a melee themed video today, and we're just gonna be talking about how melee has worked in Borderlands and try and see what made melee in Borderlands great back before Borderlands 3, because I know a lot of people are like, melee is bad in Borderlands 3 on a conceptual level. If you want to talk about power, melee is the strongest scaling effects in the game, realistically speaking. So let's talk about how this build works for a minute that we're running with Brick here. So running in, we can brute force a lot of the a lot of like ad clearing content just by hitting the berserk button and running through. I am using weapon merging for this, so we are getting some inflated stats for some of the stuff, but that's just because I am personally enjoying playing around with the merging mechanic. But there's a lot of capabilities for using this setup without merging as well. You don't need to merge to use this. It just makes it smoother, because then you don't have to constantly weapon swap. You can get all of the effects of all your weapons in one gun. The only downside to this is I like to play around with multiple different weapon types when I'm shooting at stuff, and I'm not able to get access to the sniper rifle that I have in my bar, because then if I switch to it, I lose the merge. So I have to just shotgun everything, which is both a blessing and a curse. I mean, I'm getting a boatload of stats and damage from the merge, but I'm also missing out on that sniper rifle. But there's also some other things here. When thinking about Borderlands 1 and how melee works, it's not entirely just, oh, I'm gonna punch thing to kill it. That's not the only thing that you can do here. Melee is supplemental in the sense that it is there to help balance out your kit. So here, melee is helping a lot with our survivability in the lifesteal section. We melee somebody and we get that lifesteal. And then another issue that I commonly ran into with playing Brick here was dealing with lance shield guys, like the dudes with the giant shields or the plated armor shoulder pads and stuff. A lot of them tend to turn really fast, so whenever I would try and get around them to shoot them in the head or to melee them in the head, they would always like turn to face me before I could hit them or shoot them. And so a really nice skill that's helped me with that is Bash. It has a chance to cause enemies to be dazed, which reduces their movement speed and reduces their capability to shoot. It basically incapacitates their freaking index finger so they can't pull the trigger. But there's a couple other unique things to melee when it comes to Brick here. Sting like a bee being one of them. So while you're in Berserk, you are dashing when you are pointed at a target and you start punching. You get to dash at opponents, which that's the cool little skill for Borderlands 1 being the first game in the franchise. Having a skill like that is pretty cool to see this early. And then something else interesting is with Berserk, when you melee, if you have the explosive artifact, you can get bonus from Endowed. So there's another melee bonus. It's not really melee, but there's not very many like unique effects here. We have 2 skills that are melee based that are unique, but neither of them are really that big. We have, again, Daze is really helpful for a specific type of enemy, and then Sting like a bee is helpful for the action skill. We have Iron Fist, which is giving us a flat melee damage buff. But we don't really have very much here to work with. So melee isn't the only thing that we use. We are actually still using our guns in combat, as shown by the shotgun shooting things. And we're using the grenade for healing a little bit when we don't have easy access or we're being gunned down by a turret, something like that. We don't have easy access to dealing with the big bad up there. Even with the damage reduction and stuff, it's still very difficult to just face tank a freaking turret. So, melee in this build, again, just to cover the bases here, is it can be used as a primary thing when it comes to open combat locations. But when there's a lot of the terrain and a lot of stuff that blocks line of sight, it's a lot better for you to play a more tactical position and only approach when you want to bash them with the shotgun instead of just rushing at them with your fists. And then be able to supplement that bash with the shot in the face, blowing their skull out. And there we go. Next, we move on to Mordecai. So with this Mordecai build, we are also doing weapon merging. As I said, I am absolutely loving it. I don't have any on-level artifacts because I forgot to grab them. Oh, and another thing when it comes to a lot of like the proficiency stats and stuff, these characters that I'm playing with, I found in my folder from my cloud save, and they had playthrough 1 done. They didn't have playthrough 2 done, but they were both max level with random freaking gear on them. So I was just like, well, I have to complete playthrough 2, so I'm just gonna speedrun freaking playthrough 2, not do any side quests, and just run the content, and not really worry about killing things too often. And so I did exactly that. 0 proficiencies were what I started with. I think I ended the main story with like 6 in sniper on Mordecai, and on Brick, I think 7 on shotgun. It was just like, what's the point here? But with this Mordecai build, we are double-edging sniper and melee. We are doing a lot of like hybrid sense stuff here. We are using Killing Blow, which has that 50% melee damage bonus, and then 35% chance to proc a 500% melee damage bonus. And that's really it. That's the entirety of melee on Mordecai for when it comes to just raw melee stat. Now here's a fun bit. That critical damage that you see, that from deadly, that freaking, what is it, 75%? I think it's 75%. You get that 75% from deadly, and then you get the sniper comm while you're holding a sniper. All of the critical hit bonuses that you have, including the sniper class mod, as long as you're holding the sniper, will apply to the melee. Like, what? I don't know if I caught it in this recording or not, but I hit the visual damage cap with a crit melee without Killing Blow, or Lethal Strike. I just said Killing Blow like this is BL2. Good lord. Without Lethal Strike. And so that was super interesting to see. In this build here, I do use melee as that health regen thing that I can use in that mid to close range section, where the sniper isn't exactly the best. I do use melee in a way that supplements the sniper rifle playstyle, so that I don't ever have to swap out of my sniper rifle. I slash the enemy if they get too close, or in that weird middle ground where they're just close enough to where I can't like focus on them with the zoom, but they're just far enough away to where it's not worth trying trying to back up, but trying to get close enough to get to that close range no scope distance. So I kind of just rush and melee in those instances, or I will try and just find cover. That and throwing grenades are also another option in that specific scenario, because they do fit in that distance for throwing a grenade. But either way, melee is still being used as a lot of a support factor. The sniper rifle is what's doing the most damage to enemies, and the melee isn't doing anywhere near as much on average. And then sometimes it just nukes an enemy, and it's cool. It's a novelty. And all it took was 5 points to make it a novelty. But there's not very much melee focused combat. It's a lot of how do I balance my distance and zone properly for killing enemies with the weapon kit that I have. I'll just let the rest of this run out here. And again. And because I misplayed so badly, I got downed. You know, there's a lot of people who say that BL1 is hard. And honestly, I don't really see it. After even playing without weapon merging with both of these builds, I still don't see it being difficult. Not at all. The only difficult fight that I had was Quabrax getting the Bessies and the other pearls, of course, that I had. But that was really about it. There wasn't much else that I found difficult in the game. I mean, the turrets are annoying, but it's an enemy type that's just a nuisance because of the raw amount of projectiles they fire. But I couldn't really find anything that I would argue is too difficult in BL1. I suppose the real difficulty in BL1 is getting over the graphics because of how old they are for the people who are adjusted to the newer graphical styles. You see, there we go. Well, I think I had Killing Blow in that slice. I'm pretty sure there was Killing Blow. But that was freaking damage cap with the crit melee, and that was beautiful. Well, visual damage cap. Great. Absolutely. Just slash. Boom. Trespass is my favorite skill. I absolutely love it. I am so sad that it only returned as various sniper rifles in the future installments, but I absolutely love Trespass. I definitely think it should have been a returning skill in some capacity other than just simply being a weapon. Boom. Boom. And there's a whole bunch of synergy in the skill tree that makes a lot of this work too. But mostly just focused on the melee for this video. Also, what is with the Bloodwing AI? Like, why is this so whack? Alright, so now we move on to Zero. Now, this build is very, 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 very close to the one that Garden Anarchist ran for his video. It's like 1 for 1. I think I moved 1 point, and that was about it. Yeah, literally just 1 point. I currently suck at BL2 because I think that's now my least played Borderlands game. No, pre-sequel is still the least played, but out of the core games, Pre-sequel is the least played. BL2 is the second least played. I've played BL1 more than I've played BL2, which is probably blasphemy to some people, but I think my rankings right now, when it comes to my preference in playing the Borderlands games, goes Borderlands 3, of course, for number 1, and then Borderlands 1 for number 2, and then when it comes to story gameplay, I prefer Wonderlands, but when it comes to just overall, like, there's going through playing the entire game in general, BL2 beats Wonderlands, but it's really difficult there because Wonderlands just doesn't have a viable, like, fun end game, while BL2 has raid bosses, which is what the franchise, like, kind of... It's really what everybody clung to when it came to endgame content for Borderlands. Okay, so talking about what the heck is actually going on here when it comes to, in regards to melee. So there is, I mentioned this earlier when I made the mistake of what skill thing was. Killing Blow for crazy melee damage when below 30% HP. But there's a lot of, like, there's a lot of really cool synergistic skills in this setup. There's stuff like Death Mark, where when you melee an enemy, you get access to extra damage from all sources. It doesn't have to be a melee enemy. It doesn't have to be melee damage. It could be gun damage. It could be grenade damage. It could be action skill damage. Anything like that, it gets buffed by Death Mark. And we get access to Kunai, which is a variant of ranged melee. So this way, we have not only our blades on our weapons, but now we have something that can hit stuff like buzzards and stuff. Buzzards, dragons, whatnot. That's still melee, so that we don't have to, like, switch out of using melee to... We don't have to switch to a sniper rifle. We can just use kunai. Does it functionally work like that at OP10? I don't think so. But I feel like that was the intent behind adding kunai in that regard. Having it be a support melee tool for applying Death Mark, and it be a way for you to deal melee damage to flying enemies. Now, this build also doesn't just do melee. Melee is used for a lot of the ad clearing stuff, but it's also mostly a support tool used to, again, apply Death Mark. Then you're able to apply stuff like Be Like Water with Rising Shot. You have a whole bunch of different tools and stuff that are gained from your action skill Deception, which is mostly giving you a melee damage buff. Which it's also used for better lining up your shots and whatnot. So there's a lot of melee stuff, but there's also a lot of sniper stuff. There's enough damage balanced throughout the tree for you to run both snipers and melee as two completely functional builds, completely independent from each other, all with the same skill tree spec. Is beautiful. And then if you synergize them together using stuff like the Pimpernel, which is probably the most damaging shotgun, not shotgun, I just said shotgun, sniper rifle, because it has a shotgun amount of projectiles on it. I mean, that's not exactly wrong. But there's a lot of variety that you can run with this, and there's a lot of unique special effects that come to these melees. There's also roid shields that are introduced, so there is another way of adding melee damage through equipment other than just having melee attachments on your weapons. So that was definitely an improvement upon what BL1 had. There is a dedicated melee section to a class, and that melee section isn't just action skill based. there is a lot of action skill-based stuff, but you can get away with not using it and still kill things. So there's a lot of variety that you can do here. If you want better gameplay or a better breakdown of the Zero build, go check out Garnet Anarchist's video. I did initially play a build similar to this before I saw his videos on it, but I quickly learned that the playstyle was the exact same and my skill tree was just worse. So I did just mostly switch to what he was running. There's that. Alright, so on to BL3. Now, we have this Amara build here. I've recorded a video on this before. It is the Ripper Amara build. This was a challenge build that I ran. I reran this content for this video. I just recorded a run, so it'd be in the background. Because I don't know how to separate my audio from my video after it's been compiled in the editor. So, and honestly, I don't feel like looking up a video for it. So I'm just gonna record new footage, and that's what I did. But this build kind of sums up the primary positives from what I liked from the last two games. There was a lot of support mechanics from, like in BL1, there's a lot of support usage for it and a lot of supplementary usage for melee. And in BL2, it had its own subset of playstyle while still functioning in that support-based subset. In that support-based playstyle. You were still able to use it for just support or function a playstyle around the melee mechanics that were built into the game or into your class. Now, with Borderlands 3, there were a couple things introduced that made it difficult to justify running a build like this. First, the Face Puncher. The Face Puncher is a shotgun that shoots melee damage. Now, whoever came up with that idea, I don't get why you decided to make it 100% per projectile instead of, I don't know, break down the weapon so that this way true melee isn't freaking completely obsolete because of how the scaling works with the gun. Like, each projectile does the same amount of damage as your true melee projectile, and it procs all of the effects better. Like, why use true melee if you're just gonna use the Face Puncher? But this weapon, the Ripper, very much sums up what I like about how Borderlands 3 did melee. So there is a lot of zoning where I'm constantly jumping between the really close range and the medium distance between an opponent. So that this way I have that easy crit spot that I can land, and I am getting that melee off for that extra bonus. For that bonus damage for the SMG, and I'm dealing a good amount of damage with the melee. So I can focus more on the melee cycling to deal more damage with stuff like Groundbreaker, or I can focus on zoning and get that Ripper damage to be the focus of the ad clearing sections. Which I tend to cycle melee more when I'm fighting a boss, and cycle the Ripper more when I'm doing ad clearing. But having that dynamic of I can melee and use that melee to buff the gun, or vice versa, is always super fun to me. And with how this plays out, melee overall tends to be a more support function. And I feel like that's the best way that melee can be implemented in these games, is as a support function. The Face Puncher builds, they're cool because you can use synergies with them, like the White Elephant builds with the Face Puncher, or with Ebb and Flow, where you just start freaking causing nuclear explosions to happen on top of the enemy because you killed an enemy before you shot him with the Face Puncher. Like, or body and mind, sorry, not ebb and flow, body and mind. Ebb and flow is the freaking heal skill. Good lord. Now, there are also some other fun melee style things with Amara. First, I really like how they integrated melee with elemental damage and they kind of made it synonymous with each other for the melee build. That way, you can run melee without them having to dedicate an entire like skill tree subset to being just strictly melee damage. As melee, again, I think works the best as a support tool in the games and not as well as a DPS tool when it comes to enjoyment of usage. Yeah, I feel like I got most of what I wanted to talk about here out. I basically repeated the same thing for 4 builds, except in slight variation with adding the context of this is this Borderlands game versus this is this Borderlands game. And hopefully, in my opinion, they should stick to that kind of formula instead of focusing anything on instead of focusing entirely on melee as a damage source, having it as a more of a support tool style thing and less of a full damage characteristic of a playstyle. Now, is killing blow chance or not? Is lethal strike chance freaking insta kill stuff fun? Oh heck yeah! But that also wasn't the full perk set of the build. The lethal strike thing was one skill that got 5 points in it, and I mostly just stacked crit and had a little bit of extra, well, a lot of extra melee from weapon merging. But the extra melee wasn't really necessary either. Especially with the amount of crit damage that we were getting. The crit is what really makes the melee stuff on Mordecai nuts. Because you get the comm that is 100% team critical hit damage, and that is 100% multiplicative with all of your other crit modifiers, which is ridiculous. I found that out on accident. Like, I was like, hey, does this crit effect actually apply to my melee? And I swapped it off. I meleeed somebody. I swapped it on, and I saw my damage actually double instead of just increase. And I was like, wait a minute. And it is just 100% multiplicative. It's a ×2 multiplier to everything that you're doing, which is absolutely bonkers. I wasn't expecting to see something like that in Borderlands 1, which is one of the reasons why I've gotten extremely interested in BL1. Because now I want to learn all of how the stats integrate with each other and break down the math of the game. One thing that I like about how Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3 did their melee systems is it integrates really well with their action skill. Instead of it requiring melee like Brick with his Berserk, you are forced to melee while you're in the action skill. With Borderlands 2 and 3, you don't have to melee. In 2, for some enemies, is it better to melee because many must fall and other related melee skills? Sure, depending on the scenario. But for the most part, you can choose whether to shoot your gun or to melee to proc that damage bonus. Which, I feel like that dynamic of, again, melee being a support or secondary option definitely plays a lot better than melee being the sole option. I've done true melee runs of Malawan Takedown, and I've recorded one of them posted, and as fun as that build was to just play, that It has nothing on this Ripper build. I had so much fun playing with the Ripper. It was amazing. And this Ripper build is a lot more similar to a Zero build than it is any other Borderlands 3 melee build, other than maybe some maybe some obscure Kensei build. But for the most part, this plays a lot more like Zero than it does Amara for melee, which I find to be super fun. Now, I do use the fish slap in this video, but for the most part, I think in the actual challenge run video, I just used a P-nade and forced myself to jump and melee everything instead of just relying on the fish slap to apply the Ripper melee. But the fish slap made things faster, and it synergized well enough for me for it to help the cycle and have a little bit more fun with it. This is one of the few builds that I actually enjoy the fish slap on, because most of the time the fish slap is just like, it's to down you, or other freaking stupidity with it being one of those items that scales off melee damage. It's not a melee weapon. But yeah, that's all I really got for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope I sparked some conversation for you guys.